I'm David Reffell, and I am a retired teacher. I think there are about 5 people in this room whose children I taught. And some of them actually said they wanted to come because they knew I was going to be speaking, so I suppose that's hopefully a good thing. Yes, so I was a teacher and a pastoral carer at various schools in Shropshire, but also in Sussex and Africa, funnily enough. And why did I become a Samaritan? My uncle was a Samaritan. When I was away at school at the age of 13, one of my friends said to me that he was going to end his life, and I didn't listen because I was 13, and he did. So that imprinted itself on me. And then more recently, I was teaching at a girls' school, and if you can believe this, the girls' school had a headmaster, the chairman of the governors was a man, and the tradition was that the head girls made a speech, and then the other person who made the speech was the father of the head girl. And I thought, what are we doing in a girls' school not to have a girl? So anyway, a lovely girl became head girl, and I said to the mother of the girl, why don't you do the speech? You'd be brilliant, you'd be fantastic, you're such a great speaker. And she said, oh no, my daughter is a traditionalist, I'm not doing it. And about 4 years later, her next daughter became head girl. But in the interim, and only very shortly before the end of term speeches, sadly her husband, who was a military man who was struggling without a job, having given up the military, he ended his own life. So the mother had to stand in front of the school and do the speech only months after her husband had ended his life. So when I retired as a teacher, I just sort of thought, what could I do to help? So that's how I became a Samaritan. Samaritans, by definition, is a humanist organisation, because it says on your board here, it seeks a tolerant world where reason and kindness prevail. You can live a good life and be a good person without religion. Humanists are not against religion, but support the right of everyone to believe what they want and live how they wish, as long as they don't harm others. And one of the big things that we have in our training as a Samaritan is to be non-judgmental, to listen, not to disclose anything about our own personal lives or our own beliefs, for example. And so that's what we do when we are answering the telephone. So, who are the Samaritans? Well, it's an organisation that was founded by a priest. His name, you may have heard of him, he was called Dr. Chad Vara. And when he was 25, he was just starting his career as a curate, and the first service he ever took was for a 14-year-old girl who'd ended her own life. And so he thought to himself, you know, this isn't right. And a few years later, when he applied for a job in London as rector of St. Stephen's, Walbrook, he said to the people who were interviewing him that he wanted to create an SOS telephone number for people who were struggling with mental health or considering ending their own lives. And that's what he did in the crypt of the church. They appointed him as vicar in the crypt of the church, where he worked with his secretary helping him with the telephone calls. But the condition was, this is not a religious organisation. We're doing something to help people, and I happen to be a vicar, my secretary isn't, but we're just there for people who need help and who want to speak to somebody. And Sue and I were just talking a little bit earlier with the people we were sitting next to about the kind of calls that we get on our Samaritans helpline here in Shrewsbury. And they're so varied. The age of the people is also incredibly wide. I would say the average age of the different calls you might get perhaps might be about 50, because We get a lot of university students who are struggling with coursework, and we do get, of course, some elderly people who are isolated at home and lonely and want somebody to talk to. If you think that, and I certainly did when I was at university, if you think that Samaritans is just an organisation that somebody will telephone if they're thinking of ending their own life, it isn't as simple as that, and that isn't the case. And I don't know what Sue will say when she comes to talk to you about the Shrewsbury branch, but I would estimate that no more than 10% of the calls I take does somebody seriously be considering ending their own life. There are people who mention that they're finding things a struggle and they're not really sure what the point of everything is, and so on and so forth. But actually a serious person who's saying, I'm really considering ending my own life, I'm sure it's certainly under 20% of the calls one takes. So what we do is we do not give advice, and that is a very interesting fact, because if you're the kind of person in your working life who is the sort of person that people talk to when they're struggling, and I think I was that kind of person in the schools that I've worked in, then the natural thing when a friend or a colleague comes to you and says, I'm really struggling with this. When I worked in Kenya, you know, I had one of my friends that was working there, really struggling, having moved all the way from Britain, far from family and friends, you know, wondering if they'd done the right thing. Perhaps they wanted to go back to Britain and give up being a teacher in Kenya. But when I was talking to them about it, I'd be saying, well, what are the reasons, and have you considered this, and have you been to talk to the headmaster, and so on and so forth. That is the natural human thing that you would do, isn't it, if someone comes to you and says, I'm struggling. But as Samaritans, we don't do that. We don't give any advice. The one thing we can do is signposts. So if, for example, someone has struggled in their earlier life, perhaps with child being abused, then there's an organisation called the National Association for People Abused in Childhood, NAPAC, and at some point in the call we can say, you know, I could signpost you to an organisation who might be able to help. But you're not brushing them off. You're not saying, oh, well, I can't give you any advice, so here's an organisation, why don't you call them? You explore things with them, you ask them questions, you try and unpack the situation that they are in and ask them what they're considering doing, or what they're struggling with, and why, and how long has it been going on, and hopefully you give them the chance to share their thoughts and have somebody to speak to. Funnily enough, when the Queen died, I remember somebody in the Samaritans organisation saying to me, oh, I think we could get quite a lot more calls because people are upset about it. And I thought, I'm not sure about that. And one of the first calls I got last September was from a really lovely old lady. She said, the Queen wasn't my best mate, and you know, I'm not trying to make it a great tragedy. It's just, she's the only Queen I've known as an adult, and I just want somebody to talk to about it, but I haven't got anybody to talk to. So I'm talking to you about it, and luckily, although I'm not allowed to give this away, I am actually a royalist, so I could really empathise, but I didn't, of course I wasn't allowed to say that, but at least I wasn't sort of going, well, you know, like when people ring you up and say that their cat's died, for somebody that is an enormous tragedy, and if they're on their own, it is an enormous tragedy, and it's no good sort of thinking, oh, you know, if you haven't got any pets, what's all this fuss about? Because, you know, for some people that is a really, really, because it may be built up on other things that are going on in their life and things that they're struggling with. So, here is a slide all about Samaritan service at a glance, and I'm not going to read all of what you can see there, but we are open 24 hours a day somewhere. Not, so for example, the Shrewsbury branch isn't open 24 hours a day every day, and Sue's going to tell you lots more about the Shrewsbury branch, but it's a national number that you ring Samaritans on. A friend of mine who worked with me at Morton Hall near Oswestry told me that she was a Samaritan in Shrewsbury about 25 or 30 years ago, when it was, you looked in the yellow pages, Samaritans of Shrewsbury, you rang that number, so 01743, blah, blah, blah. And she said they had a camp bed in the office, because you wouldn't get that many calls on a night to that direct number in 1985 or whenever it was. She volunteered there. So they had a camp bed and a very loud phone bell, and you'd have a bit of a slumber, and then you'd be woken up. However, now, because it's a national number, and I happened to notice the other day, I was on duty at about 2:45 in the morning, and there were 55 people somewhere in Britain calling and speaking to Samaritans at 2:45 in the morning. And we do go on, the Shrewsbury branch is open sometimes till 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's still incredibly busy. There are people calling all the time. As far as the Shrewsbury branch is concerned, Sue's going to tell you a lot more about it. But a crucial thing to mention is that the vast majority of the people, and all the people in the Shrewsbury branch, are volunteers. So we have a fantastic director who happens to be a retired teacher too, and she's probably working at least some point on every day doing something to do with our branch and keeping it going and developing it. You'll find out lots of the things that are being developed and that are helping in the Shropshire area. But it is a completely voluntary position, and nobody gets paid for any aspect of their volunteering. So this is the man who founded it, as I told you. When he, at the time that he became the vicar of St Stephen's, Walbrook, he said, this was then, 1953, there were 3 people a day taking their own life in Greater London. And that is what really made him think, I want to do something about it. And it was the Daily Mirror who gave the Samaritans their name, because they said, you're good Samaritans, which does have a religious tinge to it. But as I've already mentioned, we are a completely non-religious organisation. And So, we're not professionals. That's something I hinted at already. So, when somebody rings up and they're struggling with their mental health, we don't say, well, have you been taking medication? And if they perhaps say they've stopped taking their medication and they feel a lot worse, you don't say, oh, well, then why don't you ring your doctor and get back on the medication? You don't do that, but you explore the ideas with them, and you sort of say, well, how did you feel when you were taking the medication? What do you think your options are? What might you do to perhaps feel a bit better? What have you considered? And you get them to come up with ideas of what they might do and what might help, and you explore them with them. You bounce ideas. You say, oh, you told me that your mother was a bit hard to live with. What do you mean by that? And you get them to sort of to tell you, and you're trying to listen to what they've said, and then reflecting back, asking questions about it, asking open questions, so that you don't say, did you enjoy school? Because the answer to that is yes or no. You say, what particularly was good about your time at school, or that you mentioned that you didn't enjoy it, what were the particular reasons why, and so on and so forth. So you're giving them plenty of chances to unpack their life, talk about and reflect on what it is that they're struggling with. On any night on duty, I guess you have, if you're on a 4-hour duty, you could well take something like 6 calls. Sometimes calls are half an hour, sometimes they're a bit longer, 45 minutes or so. Rarely much longer than that unless someone's really struggling. But what you try and do is perhaps you get to a point when you're talking to them where you think we're just going round and round in circles and we're not really advancing anything for them any longer. And so at that point you might find a way of sort of saying, it's been really nice talking to you, what are you going to do now when you finish the call? And so you try to find a way of ending a call without sort of making them feel that they've been brushed off and got rid of, because that doesn't make them feel any better at the end of the time that they've been talking to you. So that's how we approach it. So I've got some figures for 2021. 5,219 people in Britain ended their own life, and 3,852 of them were male and 1,367 were female. So there are large numbers more men who do end their own lives than women. And when we were doing our training, I remember being asked, it was a sort of reflecting thing. People were saying, well, why do you think that might be? And I'm sure you've all got ideas about why you think it might be, but some of the things that we reflected on are the fact that somehow, quite often, women getting together will talk about the things that are good and bad in their life. Some women anyway, quite a lot. And some men just think that it's not really manly, and all you're going to talk about is the football, etc., and you're not really going to tell your friends what actually you're struggling with. And I know when we were talking about it, we also thought about the fact that quite a lot of the time, in what was originally a bit more of a paternalistic society, men had the idea, I've got to provide for my family. And obviously now, we're a much more even society, and women do very, very high professional jobs, and sometimes earn far more than their husbands, but quite often that there may be in the psyche of some men the idea of things are going pear-shaped, money's running out and everything like that. It's all on me and I'm failing as a parent. I have been volunteering. Sue's going to talk about lots of different places that we work in the area, but I've been volunteering at the food bank in Oswestry, and I've had people coming in, and I remember that the head of the food bank, Liz, was saying to me that one of the people that came in to the food bank to get some food for their family was a lorry driver covered in tattoos with his sort of vest top and everything, this sort of thing, and he just burst into tears when he came into the food bank because he just felt that he failed his family and that he shouldn't be crawling in here to get help. Thank goodness that there was the food bank there to sort of support him, talk to him, and now with us volunteering there, then usually they come and have a cup of tea when they're waiting in the queue to get their food. So hopefully that gives them a chance to talk with you, and you end up just finding out about why they are struggling, and hopefully again help them to reflect on things. What sort of calls do we get? It can vary from university students who are struggling to finish their coursework, people in toxic relationships that are either frightened or just very unhappy and wanting somebody to talk to. As I mentioned, sometimes elderly people that are very lonely on their own, and people living in places where their neighbours are very antisocial and they can't go out or they're frightened to go out, and they just want somebody to talk to and to share their frustrations or their sadnesses, and that's what we're there for. Obviously, Samaritans, one of the things about Samaritans is that our principle is we want to try and achieve the fact that fewer people die by ending their own lives. That is a massive and major part of what Samaritans is about. But when people call you and they talk about the fact that they're considering ending their life, we don't say, oh, well, you don't want to do that, that's not a good idea, I'm going to tell you 5 reasons why your life isn't that bad, and don't do it, blah, blah, blah. We absolutely do not respond like that. We ask them what it is they're struggling with, and we listen, and we're there for them, and sometimes you have to be there and sit with them while they do, or you think they do, you don't always know. But you don't say, I'm here to support you, if they say that, because that could sound as if you're saying, I'm here to kind of help you to do it, we're keen, which you're not at all. But what you don't want to do is say, well, you're doing the wrong thing, you've got the wrong ideas, I'm going to tell you what the right ideas are. That's not how we respond. But we try to be there, and if somebody mentions anything to do with, I think I've had enough, I'm fed up, I don't see the point anymore, then that's the point at which you start to ask the sort of questions that to elicit the ideas, perhaps to give them the chance. And by openly being able to talk about how they're feeling as if life isn't worth living, sometimes actually just being able to talk about it, being able to say how they're feeling, at the end of the call they may feel a great deal better. So, and perhaps not feel as if that's what they're going to do. That's what you hope. So here I've probably talked about most of the things that you can see on this slide, but we do say that's the only people we can't. It's just like being a teacher when someone comes to you and says, I want to tell you something, and I don't want you to tell anybody else. You don't say to your pupil, fine, I absolutely promise I won't, because there are times when, for whatever reason, actually you do have to. But what we don't do is we don't go out of the branch and talk to our family and friends about what we've been listening to. So we can say to people, we're here to listen to you. We might have to talk to somebody else in the branch if we feel we need to get help to you or whatever, if you're happy for that, and so on and so forth. But you're working with them and not making them feel afraid that things are going to be out of their control. So I've said that already. So somebody said, I know there'll be someone there to listen, someone to say you're doing all right and you won't judge me. When you're on a call, sometimes people say something at the end of the call about how they really appreciate what Samaritans do and that they're so grateful and you're really amazing and all that sort of thing. That isn't really what we do it for, and you might have somebody that doesn't say any of that to you, but who actually has really benefited from the call you've made. So I don't think we end a call thinking, if someone said, oh, it was marvellous and you were so brilliant, oh, that was the best call I've had that evening. That's not necessarily the case. The call where the person is so low that they can't even think about how kind you are or anything else, but they have had a chance to talk and they are feeling a tiny bit better. That might be the best call you've done on an evening. So Sue's going to talk about how we reach out to people in our communities. But if somebody needs to talk to Samaritans, they can pick up the phone and dial 116123 anytime, day or night. Somebody will answer. Sometimes the waiting time, as I mentioned, even in the middle of the night, can be a few minutes, can't it? But at least somebody will answer. But another thing that Samaritans really wants to do is to try and get the government to help to ensure that fewer people die by ending their own lives. And obviously the work we do does raise the profile of that sad statistic and the sad situation that some of the mental health provision perhaps may not be what it should be. but we are there, and we can help by signposting people to Mind and other organisations where they might be able to get professional help. So I've pretty much told you about what happens when people call. We just try and reflect things, and we listen, and we don't tell you what to do. So Samaritans has now got a system whereby it's a messaging system, because there are so many young people who in their lives, maybe not all young people as well, but in their lives, if they want to get something sorted, how do they do it? They do it like this. They don't do it by speaking. So, you know, I do answer the instant messages, and which is a bit like WhatsApp for Samaritans. It's on a computer system, and you get people on that messaging system talking about the most serious things that you would have thought they would actually want to pick up the phone and talk. They don't want to speak to a person. They just want to, because that's how they, if they're frustrated with one of their friends, that's how they do it. They don't do it by telling them face to face. We do have an email system, and sometimes there are thousands of emails waiting to be answered, and lots of us in Shrewsbury sit in the branch and reply to the emails that have been sent, and the people will know that they're not going to get an instant reply to that, but we work on the same basis of again, reflecting what they've said, asking them questions that get them to perhaps say more about things that they've alluded to, and just keeping the conversation going between them. So that's a bit about what Samaritans is and what we do, and Sue's going to tell you more about Shrewsbury Samaritans.
Like magic, as if we knew what we were talking about. Samaritans of Shrewsbury. So, my name again is Sue Forgie, not Sarah. I know how the mix-up happened. We have a lady who helps us with PR, and her name is Sarah, and somehow we got melded. So first of all, I'll talk a little bit about why and how I became a Samaritan. Many years ago, because I'm now in my 70s, but many years ago, when I was 18, I trained as a psychiatric nurse. And I trained at Broadmoor. Yes, yeah, you get the measure. I sort of dive in head first. And I qualified. I had the most amazing professor there, and he helped me a great deal. I struggled with written examinations, not because I'm dyslexic, but because I get brain freeze. And he arranged, Dr. Patrick McGrath, when I first submitted my first set of examination papers, he pulled me into his office and he said, "What is this rubbish? What is this rubbish? I know you know this stuff because you argue with me when we're in lectures." And he said, "I know you know this stuff like the back of your hand. Why have you written this rubbish?" And I explained to him. And he actually arranged for me to take a lot of my exam papers verbally, which was unheard of in those days. So I have a lot to be grateful for. So I qualified, but I realised that Broadmoor and psychiatric nursing was not really right for me. The environment was not particularly healthy, as you can imagine. So I left and went off in different directions and had 2 other very successful careers. I retired 7 years ago when I turned 65, and I sat down and thought, what am I going to do this time? I can go out and lunch, and I battle with my weight, so that wasn't going to be particularly good for me. I wanted to do something useful. And with the memory of the psychiatric nursing and the proliferation of people with mental health issues, and I thought, I'd like to do something useful. And I went along and chatted to Samaritans and trained with them. I can, hand on heart, is that what my heart is? I can hand on heart say it is the best decision I have ever made in my life. In 2022, we handled 8,200 phone calls and 2,400 emails. I haven't got the numbers for online chats or face-to-face meetings. Online chat that David talked about, it's still being piloted. They turn it on for some branches and we're still piloting it, but it is something that will be coming full force. But we're out in the community as well. We do a lot of what we call outreach work, and that is where we proactively go out and put ourselves in places where we can give emotional support in other settings. And food banks, David mentioned food banks. That's an area that we want to expand. People are 10 times more vulnerable if they are facing economic crisis, poverty, and food banks is an obvious place. We're having about 30 face-to-face conversations a month currently, and across 2 food banks, and we want to add 3 more food banks this year. You may have seen us at Shrewsbury Railway Station, and I used to be part of the rail team, and we have had a national activity in training British Rail staff and British Transport Police staff to proactively approach people who look a bit unhappy. They are usually sitting on the end of a platform. They're usually looking down and very lost in thought. And I've had people like that on the railway station, and I've gone up to them and I've gone, gosh, it's chilly this evening, isn't it? And it's almost like they jolt out and engage in small talk. And I've got this huge green tabard on that says Samaritans. And on one occasion, a chap told me that he was contemplating how he was going to jump in front of the next train. And he pulled back from that because we had jolted him out of that line of thought. I won't say train of thought because that's too good. But yeah. So we give talks, we come and talk to groups like yourselves, and we're also out amongst groups of people who face difficult conversations. People like hairdressers, librarians, clergy. They're increasingly facing more difficult conversations, and we are sharing our listening skills and trying to help people manage those conversations better. We're part of Shropshire Public Health, and we are the Vice Chair of the Suicide Prevention Group. We were at the forefront of having the bereaved by suicide support facility established. And it's, if you are bereaved, there is, that is dreadful sadness, and people handle it in their own time. Bereaved by suicide is a whole different ballgame and needs specialist help. We go out into schools, places of education, our postvention team. So if there is a suicide or an attempted suicide, we will go into schools and colleges and places of education in Shropshire and into Wales and support the staff. There's another organisation that supports children, but it's the staff that we talk to. And one of the national things we do is the Missing People charity, and this is something I'm particularly keen on. People who go missing, who go walkabouts, are they're very high risk. And we've had the Missing People charity. The way it works is the police give the details to the Missing People charity. They try and contact the missing person. If they cannot contact them, they pass it to us. And we receive the details and we will try and connect with them. The service has been going for many years, but about 4 or 5 years ago, we expanded it to incorporate more police forces and more Samaritans branches. And the contact rate has risen, you can see there, it's gone from 5% to 66%. I'm so proud of that figure. So the system is, if somebody goes walkabouts, we're given their mobile phone number. A text is sent to them by the Missing People charity to say that they've passed the number to us and that we will come up as an unknown number. And please can they allow their phone to accept unknown numbers? And it's a safe, confidential place for them to talk. Yeah, I mean, fantastic. And I have had several occasions where I've run a missing person and just been able to share what they're going through. The rail programme, I mean, we've gone, so the national team of 15 people have gone out and they have trained the staff. And you'll probably see some advertising about the Small Talk campaign that we launched. And we, in the branches, will go out to major rail stations. And that's really our definition of what we call outreach. We're going out, we're being proactive, and we are talking to people in high-risk areas. So, providing face-to-face emotional support, and David does an excellent job with that. I was assisting him in Oswestry a couple of weeks ago. We had several people who were in distress. I wasn't, strangely enough, although I've been in Samaritan for 7 years, I wasn't permitted to talk to them until I'd done my ESOS training, which is this Saturday, but then I'll be by his side. So that's some of the things that we do. The third-party referral, the signposting, so if people are in difficulties, citizens' advice is a good port to call, NAPAC we've mentioned, Mind, Alcoholics Anonymous, gambling people. So whatever people's key issues are, we will encourage them. We don't tell them, and I will reinforce what they can't go on forever in fundraising. But we would love any help we can get to fundraise. I'm about to launch a public campaign. I've never done that before, and it's called Phone Call Fiver, and little cards like that, where people can text and donate a fiver, or they can use another word and donate any amount. But on average, it costs us £5 per phone call. And we're going out out to the public to say, look, you know, we know times are hard, but if you can spare a fiver, that could save somebody's life. £200 is what it costs us to train a new volunteer. And we want to add 22 new volunteers this year, so you can do the maths on that. And I just sort of boil it down to, it costs £100 a day. And you don't have to do anything with us. Do your own thing. You know, have a coffee morning, do a bike ride. You know, we had a man came to us last year, and he was going on this phenomenal journey of cycling and walking and kayaking and raising money, and he raised £2,000 for us. So we went, wow, ex-fireman, wonderful. There is a fundraising page on our Samaritans of Shrewsbury website, and if you type in Samaritans of Shrewsbury, it'll take you there. There is a central charity which we are affiliated to, and when you see a national campaign, money goes into the central charity, but we don't get any of that. Yes, so that's the donate, the fiver, the text to donate for phone call fiver. And that is how we are contacted.
I think we could go and ask you questions. I mean, this is a topic that has really touched our imaginations and our feelings. And I must say, you are two very impressive people and great speakers, and it is a very, very good evening. And I would like people here to think a little bit about whether you or people you might know to suggest might be suitable volunteers and have the time. Tell other people about the Samaritans so that the more people know about it, the more people can use it effectively, hopefully. And also, the tin isn't quite full. So before you go, add something to it. So thank you both very much indeed for really a wonderful evening. Thank you very much. I should just say that once we've cleared up here, most of us go over to the Anchor Pub for a pint. All very welcome to join us.